This is a description of the setup for using straight chloroform to introduce a sample into the Mass Spec. And let me go over the components, starting with the syringe pump. So this is our typical syringe pump. It's infusion only, so it's relatively cheap, about $300. And this one's been modified so that when it gets down to the end, it's going to press against this switch, and the lights will come on, indicating to the user that it's not pumping anymore. Alright. And then we have our glass gas-tight syringe. Alright, so let me pull this out. Alright, so it's a Hamilton syringe, 5 ml, gas-tight, number 1005. And then that's hooked, connected by this Valco connector. So that is this part here. And then it's connected to a filter that has replaceable Fritz. And so this part is that. Got two of those. That's what the filter looks like in the pack. Alright, let me look at the filter. Has these cute little replaceable Fritz. Alright. So 10 microns. So that's to filter the solvent. And then we have a connection with some fused silica tubing. So fused silica tubing is from Polymicro, TSP 150/350 fused silica tubing, 10 meters in 2017, costs about $180. Alright, the 150 refers to the ID in microns, the OD. And so if you're in the English system, it's about 5 thousandths of an inch ID, 15 thousandths of an inch OD, a little bit less. And so the brown stuff is the tubing, so this is the tubing. And then for the adapter, we use Teflon tubing. So use that. The Teflon tubing has an inside diameter of 15 thousandths. So the fused silica tubing will slide into the Teflon tubing. And then I like to use these double-sided ferrules and stainless steel finger-tight connectors. They're made by SSI. I think Fisher sells in the U.S. So far, all the chloroform is going to see is going to be the Teflon on the plunger, stainless steel, fused silica, and then it makes its way to the classic 7125 Rheodyne valve. And then this has been set up. So we have a 3 microliter loop. It's a 6-port injection valve. And the solvent makes its way to, this is what's going to be connected to the Mass Spec. So next we'll take it up and hook it up to the Mass Spec. So the system is on the cart right now, just for convenience as far as moving it around and keeping it out of harm's way. The sample is going to be in the typical gas-tight, blunt nose, 25 microliter syringe, and the sample will go through the needle guide like that, and then be introduced and undoubtedly overfill the 3 microliter loop. And then you'll have injection by moving it that way. So let's get up to the front end of the Mass Spec and show how that connection works. So, wheeled up the syringe pump, and then what's going to happen is that this connection is going to be, well, the HPLC pump is turned off. Alright, and so this is what would be the flow. This would be the flow from HPLC column or the pump. And then it's just a matter of hooking up. This guy here. And since the pressure is relatively low, let me pause this. It's easier with two hands to make this connection. And this is a typical upchurch finger type connection. And so if we go back over the system, so we have our chloroform going through the filter, making its way through 6-port injection valve. And then over here is the flow out. After you do the injection, and makes its way to the electrospray source. There's a little bit of Teflon tubing here as it actually makes its way to the source needle, and then to the Mass Spec. And why go through the trouble of having a manual injection valve and a syringe pump? Well, there is great reluctance in our good HPLC 4-solvent pump to be putting chloroform in here. What it would do to seals on a long-term basis, and that chloroform is not acetonitrile. It's definitely more aggressive in my opinion. And then the other item is what the chloroform would leach from the PEEK tubing. Who knows? So in this setup, all a chloroform is going to see are some occasional Teflon surfaces, stainless steel, and fused silica. This is our waste container. Right. And so if anything goes wrong, then replacing a Rheodyne valve or a $300 syringe pump, although the chloroform's not going to see this. A gas type 5 ml syringe, definitely less than $100. Rheodyne valve, that's in the range nowadays, probably about 700 to 1,000. There are Japanese clones that are about $400. So, and this seems to have held up well, I would say, with so far roughly about 2 days exposure to chloroform. So, this is the setup for having a sample dissolved in salt and chloroform and making its way then to the electrospray source for some getting some Mass Spec data. And as far as this syringe pump and the modification, there's a YouTube video on that as far as what this is. The advantages of this syringe pump are they're relatively inexpensive and can be modified. At least I was able to modify it fairly cheaply, and then it does not become a syringe crusher when it bottoms out, because what happens is that this, when it hits the switch, then diverts the action, and the LEDs, especially if you get blinking LEDs, will let you know that, oh, pumping has stopped. typical flow for this is on the order of 2 mils an hour.